have talked about victims, we have talked about abandoned houses. I want to ask if there are any victims in the house. Any victims here? No? That's a serious question, so I would like to ask the victims here on stage and also our Prof. Jasri, Head of Finance Department. Maybe you can quickly, briefly explain us your case.
Selangor State. No houses involved, just plots of land. 600 of them, constructed between 2000 and 2003, and the developer disappeared in 2004, leaving the infrastructure not completed and the conversion and subdivision also not completed. So 600 people ended up, in effect, with a plot of agricultural land to which they had no title. In addition to that, the developers had failed to apply to the state government for, under the National Land Code, for conversion of what was estate land. It was first a rubber estate and then palm oil estate for some other use, and therefore were in breach of the National Land Code and therefore in breach of the law. When the developer left the site, he took with him roughly 50 million ringgit from the bridging financier and roughly 60 million ringgit from the purchasers. Nothing has been seen or heard of him since, but the bridging financier put him into liquidation in 2007. And one aspect of abandoned housing schemes which we haven't touched on so far today is the question of liquidation. Now, we have endured, and I think that's the right word, 6.5 years of the liquidation process, and during that process, despite best efforts by the membership of our group, we have received very little support from either any federal authority or any authority related to the banking industry. And if I can just summarize that, we have filed more than 120 police reports against the developers. The result of that was zero, no response. We have complained through Bank Negara's own complaints mechanism, the so-called link system. More than 100 of our members have complained using that system. And as you've just heard, Bank Negara sends the complaints to the bank concerned. It did this in a number of occasions, but out of the 100 people who sent in complaints, only about 6 got a response. 2 meetings between the bank and ourselves produced action plans. We fulfilled our part of the action plans, and Bank Negara failed to fulfill theirs. The Jabatan Insolvency, which has a monitoring role for private liquidators. Oh, I've been cut off. It has a monitoring role for private liquidators, and has also not engaged in the process to the extent that they were really not very interested in going forward to establish the facts of the case, and preferring at one stage to say that they would refuse to meet us unless the liquidator was present. And we found it rather difficult to believe that a federal government agency needs a third party to be present to talk to the public. So the whole issue of liquidation is another factor in the general misery of abandoned housing schemes, which I draw to your attention.
Thank you. I think you have another someone who would like to share your view. Is it?
Okay. Hello. Assalamualaikum. I'm also the victim of the abandoned project. What I would like to share with you, because some of you are bankers or regulators in this. My house already abandoned for more than 7 years. So you can imagine the hardship that we have been, the legal letters that we have received. All those is because of the flawless of the system adopted by all the regulators. So this is what I want to highlight. And I thank all the organizations to bring up these issues, because all parties must full responsible on what they are doing, from the developers, from the bankers, lawyers, architects, and so forth. What I've been endured is because all these parties are failed. They say that they are professionals, but they are not. That's why this platform, I hope we can highlight, and the most important, we penalize those who they call so-called professional, and make sure this victim, we have a dream house here. Everybody have a dream house. So make things reality. This is very simple, but because of the money, I know, all the parties involved, all the regulators involved, because of the money, they don't want to continue. So the victim become the victim, the issue become an issue. So hopefully with this platform, things can get moving to solve this problem. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We have heard the views of the two quote-unquote victims. I know it's still very early at this discussion level. We have after lunch to talk more about it. Maybe at this point, is there anybody like to respond to any of these comments? I understand there's a representative from the ministry. I don't know whether they're here now. Maybe, before we give a second round to these two gentlemen here, is there anybody who would like to respond?
Maybe our friend can tell us what exactly was his case.
Yeah.
What was your case, how it developed? My case,
Yeah, we'll go with the second round here. Yeah.
Okay, perhaps I can share with you how is the case. I bought this house in 2004 for investment purpose. So as you know, I'm only a layman person. I just follow whatever the regulators, the bankers, the lawyers ask me to do. I sign. And what I know is that all the parties might play their role to complete my house, because I'm also putting my risk buying a house where the house is not complete yet at that time. So what I want to put across the point here is that the developers, how do I know they are licensed or not? Yeah, we only, as a layman, go to KPKT, checking, and so forth. As some of the speakers also said just now, even though they are registered, they are laughing because they know that even they are registered with the KPKT, they also having abandoned projects. So the what do you call it? You put in place the rules, but people play around with it. So I agree with Dr. Rafiq just now. This regulator, you must act like a gangster. So if you are just sitting there in the office, party over here, over there, so you are not playing your role. So that's, my house is still incomplete. I've been serving legal notice. I'm nearly bankrupt, not yet bankrupt, but I have other friends who on the same development, they're already bankrupt, their family already broken, so they are really in mess, totally mess. So you can see the repercussion of this abandoned projects. It's not really on the house, it's not complete, but the family matters also become affected. Okay.
Would you like to have your opinion?
Yes, thank you. There are a couple of issues arising from what's just been said. In the case of our 600 purchasers, roughly a third of them are bank borrowers, and of course are continuing to pay their banks, even though many of them took out a loan 10 or more years ago. The other two-thirds paid cash to the developer. And many of those people were reaching the end of their working lives and were preparing to retire to this particular development. 300 of those people were not recognized by the bridging financier because the redemption sum was not paid by the developer to the bridging financier. And so those people can be excluded, if the bank so chose to do so, from any further gains from their purchase. But one of the key things that seems to me about today's meeting is that it gives a forum for further publicity for all these issues. It shouldn't be necessary for the public to be trained as lawyers before they can buy a house. And in the case of our group, we have many of our members who are illiterate in all languages. Yet they are expected to sign sale and purchase agreements and other documents, mostly in English, on the advice of their lawyers. But it's very evident, looking at the detail of some of these cases, that either their lawyers are ill-informed or have not taken the trouble to examine the detail of what they're asking their clients to sign. And so the more public awareness there is of some of these apparently quite minor legal issues, but actually quite major legal issues, I think is a good thing.
Okay, thank you very much. I think, as I said, we are far from having the solution, although I'm sure many people would like to have a thought on it. So I echo what Prof. Kamil has mentioned. I think the purpose of the Institute is to come and gather this very particular important issue and to share with the public, right, of how we can address this issue. So I think we'll stop at this juncture. We'll have lunch. Okay, I'll pass it to and then we'll come back to that.
Thank you very much to all victims. Thank you very much to all victims.